Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host. Today's guest knows a thing or two about endurance, not just on the trail, but also in everyday life. Vincent Antunez is a retired U.S. Army major, a physician assistant, and the founder of Trail Toes, a foot care company he first dreamed up while deployed on a mountaintop in Afghanistan. After more than 3 decades of service, he's taken the same mindset into some of the hardest ultramarathons on earth. From the Vol State 500K to 6 finishes at Grand to Grand Ultra. In our conversation, Vincent talks about what keeps him going when every part of him wants to quit, why the biggest battle is usually in the mind, and how endurance has become his teacher, shaping how he thinks about pain, humility, and what really matters to finish strong. It's an inspiring story of service, perseverance, and finding quiet joy in doing something that most people would call impossible. So let's get into it. Vincent Antunez, welcome to the On Adventure podcast. And this is going to be a fun one, partly because I know a little bit about you, partly I know who recommended you to do this, and so I don't take that lightly either. So I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me today, and looking forward to this.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you were recommended by Lisa Smith-Batchen, who is a legend that I was able to talk to just a few weeks ago. And she didn't recommend anybody else, but she did recommend you. So this will be fun.
Lisa and I go way back. Actually, it's a pretty interesting story, if you don't mind me telling it.
Go right ahead. Let's jump into it.
So I was in Afghanistan, and I forget the year, but she was attempting her first Badwater Quad, the first female to ever attempt it. I don't know if it attempted, but the only female that I know of that was attempting it. And so, unfortunately, she didn't make it her first time. But I had just gotten back off a mission. I was doing air evac missions at that time. And I got back and I was reading that she didn't make it. And so I just took a shot at it, and I wrote her and I said, "Hey, Lisa, I know you don't know me." I sent her some of my specifics, what I'd done in the running world, in the medical world, in the military and stuff, and said, if you ever attempt the Badwater Quad again, I'd be honored to be a part of your team. And blindly, she wrote back and said, yes, sure. And so when she attempted it the second time, we got her through it without any real problems, other than she did have some psychedelic events when she was out there. But but other than that, she had minimal issues medically or physically. So it was a pretty interesting and epic event. And what was interesting about that was that she didn't just go to Whitney Portal, which is part of the Badwater, Badwater Basin. She went all the way to Whitney and back down, all the way up and back down. So I never went to Whitney. I don't like heights, so I stayed in the hotel. So that's how I met Lisa. We've been friends ever since. And I was on her team when she tried her run across the U.S., but then she got gallstones and had to stop that too.
How far into the race was she when that happened?
I think we got to like 29 Palms, outside of 29 Palms in California. So.
And you were on as kind of a medical director to oversee her.
Yeah, so I was there as part of the team, cook and cleaner and
whatever,
caretaker and driver and everything else. So I don't really consider myself to have one specific role, especially when it comes to crewing, because usually have only a few people and everybody's got to kind of pull their weight, so.
Yeah, well, that's cool. Now, if you don't mind, tell a little bit about your background in the Army and how and when doing long distance races kind of worked its way into your life.
Yeah, so I joined the Army early on when I was a young man. I joined in 1980 originally, and I was a young infantryman. And I did that for 2 years, got out, went to school, and graduated from Florida State with a BS in communications and a minor in ROTC. And I got my commission in 88. And I was a medical service corps officer. And I did that until like 91. I was in Korea, left Korea, went to go work for my dad. And while I was working with him, I joined the reserves and I was in civil affairs. So I did that for like 11 years in the reserves. And then while I was doing that, I quit working for my dad and went back to school and got all my prerequisites to go to PA school. And so I finally got accepted in like 87 after a stint in Croatia and Bosnia, doing the rebuilding in Bosnia.
Wow.
As part of the civil affairs team. And so I graduated from PA school in 2000 and went back in the Army in 2001 as a PA. And then I finished up my last 14 years as a PA in the Army.
So all told, how many years have you spent in the Army?
34 is what I got for my retirement.
Wow, that's
Sorry, 32.
fantastic.
I'm sorry, 32 years. 32. Yeah.
32 years.
Yeah.
And so you were in Afghanistan when it was really fired up for the several years.
Yeah. So when I was on active duty, I was one of the most deployed PAs on active duty. And I spent 6.5 years in Afghanistan and Iraq. And 19 of that was with the State Department, providing medical care for their security detail as a civilian PA. So, but even with that, I was still one of the most deployed PAs on active duty when I was active duty.
Wow. And were you running and racing during this time, or did that come afterwards?
No. So when I went back in the Army in 2000, I had two stipulations. One is I had to go back. I had to go to a combat unit, and I wanted to go to Europe. And that was the two stipulations I had from my recruiter. And they sent me to the 1st Armored Division. And when I first went over there, I went over there alone, and I was staying in the officer barracks quarters. And there was a bunch of guys, they were down in the TV room or something. And so I was there by myself. So I went down and, introduced myself, told them who I was. And we got to drinking a few beers, as you do in the Army. And they were talking about going to do this run in the morning. And granted, it's like 2:00 in the morning at this point, and they're getting up at like 6:00 to go do this run. It's called a Volksmarch, and I'd never heard of it and didn't understand what it was. And so I said, and they said, "Do you want to come?" And I'm like, "Sure." I just met these people; they seemed pretty fun. So we went to go do this run, this Volksmarch, in some small little town. And Volksmarches in Germany are pretty cool because you go to these small little towns, and the town pretty much kind of puts on the event. There's usually like a city hall or something where there's a big, like afterwards there's sausages and soups and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of fun. It really, and they're not huge, but like you can do a marathon for $5, and you get a certificate and a patch and stuff like that. But anyway, so I showed up and they drove. And, again, it had been a late night. And so there's always that post-morning residual from the night before. Anyway, so we went to go sign up, and we signed up. And it turns out we're walking and walking and walking and walking and walking. And I didn't even have any idea where we were or how far we were going. But it turns out that this was a marathon that we were doing.
Jeez.
42.195 miles. And I kept thinking to myself, what the hell are we doing? And it was pretty cool because you go to these places, and a lot of times they have like these little, not aid stations, but they're little places you can get like food and stuff. And then you walk into these towns, and you go stop in a bakery and get like a donut or a croissant or something. And anyway, so I finished that event, and I'm like, how far did we just go? And this what you just did 26 miles. And I'm at 26 miles on nothing. I had no training, no nothing. I went from being a civilian ortho PA in North Carolina to, an Army PA, and then I'm doing this event without like running 2 miles or anything like that, but I was like, at that point, it's really pretty. So Germany's beautiful. Small town was cool. The whole event was really neat. And so I started doing these Volksmarch marathons almost every weekend. And if I wasn't deployed, me and my friend Mark Walther, we'd either play golf or we'd go do a marathon someplace. And I ended up accumulating, I don't know, I think I did well over 100 marathons while I was there. But what's really cool about these events, and I keep telling race directors here, is that stop giving out medals, give out patches. Because people can sew patches on, and then they can display your event for the rest of the world to see. It's not in a drawer hung up someplace. Because what was really cool is like you see these old guys, there'd be like, old guys and women, they'd have these, they have a jacket with patches all over it. They take that jacket off, they'd have a sweatshirt that was full of patches. Their pants were full of patches just because they had been doing it for so long. And, I have shadow boxes with a bunch of my patches on them, and they're pretty cool. And just to kind of commemorate it, because if you do, they have a marathon patch. So if you do 8 marathons in a year, you get a special certificate it honors a renowned a marathoner, not ultra, but marathoner, and there's a special patch for them too. And so I think I have like 4 of those commemorating 32. But the other thing I started doing was I got my soldiers, my medics, to come with me, and so they would come do them with me. And I had a dog, my German Shepherd Lena, did over 22 marathons with me, and
Oh my gosh.
we did back-to-back marathons one weekend, and then on a Monday, because I think it was a 3-day holiday or something, and she came to me the third day and said, "Hey, you ready to go again?" And I couldn't even get out of bed, and she was like, "Let's go, dude." So she was crazy. And you think about a dog, right? Because I'm doing the road, like, I'm staying on the path, and she's chasing rocks and sticks and running in the water and back up. So she, I did a marathon. She did 2.
Yeah,
So
living her best life though, I'm sure.
oh, she was great. Yeah, we had a great relationship. I could tell her to stay on the trail, and I could walk away out of eyesight, and she would still be sitting there waiting for me to call her.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah, she is a beautiful dog.
So you're the first one that you did with those guys. I'm assuming you didn't run a whole lot of that race, or did you?
No, we ran a little bit of it, but for most of it, it's been a hike. And to be honest with you, even now, like, I don't run a lot. I run enough to keep my pace below like 20 minutes a mile, because I know I just got to finish. My job is to finish. I paid for the event. I want to finish. I have a couple DNFs. Like, I think Lake Tahoe, I got a DNF at Lake Tahoe, and I've gotten a couple other ones. I was doing a stage race in Canada, and I stopped that one, but there's reasons that I stopped that, but I don't want to talk about why. It wasn't mental, it wasn't physical, it was other issues.
Got it. Yeah.
So, but that was another DNF. I think I have a couple more, but I try not to quit. And if I do, I always say, like, because I teach a lot of classes, I teach a lot of blister classes and stuff. And so I always say there's 3 things that are going to take you out, the 3 Bs: the balls and back of your feet, your belly, and your brain. And I've never had problems with my belly. I never had problems with my feet, but the reason I've quit has always been my brain.
Interesting. Yeah, I find this fascinating, but of the people that I've interviewed over the last couple of years, this seems to be pretty common, that the body will actually go much further than the brain says. And so in any endurance feat, it's always going to get to a point of the brain saying, "No, this is it. We're done. You're going to die. You can't go any further." But people still do.
Yeah.
So how have you been able to notice that and get past it? Is it a mantra? Is it things that you tell yourself? How does that work for you?
I think I just try and keep an optimistic outlook, and I try not to ever let myself get to the point where I let the pain get the better of me, whatever it is. My biggest issue, like, for instance, I just did Grand to Grand, which is 171 6-stage 7-day race where you carry all your own gear. My gear started out at like 18 to 19 pounds. And then, but you carry all your own food, all your own sleeping gear. The only thing they provide is water during the event and a tent at night for you to sleep in. And my problem is climbing. I don't climb very well because I get short of breath really, really quickly. But so that's really my biggest downfall. So I have to stop and take a lot of the second day of the event, there's a huge climb up this mountain, and it really never stops after that because you're always going up. But that first climb always gets me. And it took me, I think the climb up is like a 2.5 miles or something. And it took me an hour to get up that hill. And because I have to keep stopping, but I got to keep telling myself that you just got to keep going. And my big thing this time was just one foot in front of the other. And I had to, and the other thing I said, I had to get through day 2. Once I got through day 2, I knew I could get through the rest of the race. So.
Gotcha. So it is kind of an internal conversation that gets you through that.
Yeah.
And has that developed over time, or have you always, you feel like you've always kind of had that ability to talk yourself through something tough? So
one of my biggest issues early on was self-confidence, because I grew up in my childhood, single mom, you know, not much money, you know, kind of, we were the black sheep of the neighborhood because she was divorced, the only female, you know, the only woman divorced in white suburban neighborhood in Northern California. And we were also not, there were other things that made us like the black sheep of the neighborhood. But I always had like a self-confidence issue. And I remember when I joined the Army in 1980, one of the biggest issues I had was the obstacle course. And there was this one climb. It's like a ladder climb, but with the rungs getting higher and higher. So you climb, be able to reach it. And then by the time you got to the very top, you were like almost on your tiptoes to get over it. And I remember just being like, I'll never be able to do this. I won't be able to do it. I'll be too scared to do it. And for some reason, I was able to get myself over that one thing. And once I got over that helped me gain a lot of self-confidence. I think that is really silly, that one little thing. And there was also another one. We did there was a big obstacle course in the jungles of Panama. I went through they have a jungle warfare school. They used to, I don't know if they still have it anymore, but that was a very difficult obstacle course there too. And once you get through that kind of stuff, you're like, okay, I'm on the ground. I'm not climbing anything. I mean, since then I went to air assault school. I've jumped out of the airplanes and you know, all of that stuff as in the Army, but I would never do it as civilian though, because I'm just anyway.
Yeah.
But I think once you get over those terrifying obstacle courses or those obstacles, not just courses, but just obstacles, I think you're able to tell yourself, well, you've done harder. So you're looking at, you know, 100 miles or 171 miles, or in the case of Vol State, which I also just completed, you know, 314 miles. You're like, how am I ever going to do that? Well, you're just going to go one foot in front of the other. There's a woman by the name of Lisa Decker who's out of Texas, and you should interview her because she did Vol State right. She had a little crew. They had like 4 of them together. They ended up being 4, but they had fun the whole time. Like you saw their posts online. They're all like smiling. They were drinking. They had a couple beers while they were on the course, eating food, stopping at the Dollar General. And they got through that event through fun, not through like an endurance thing. For them, it was just like a daily walk, you know, with their friends. And I really appreciated their outlook on that event as opposed to it being like a challenge. It seemed to me like they were just having fun the whole time.
Well, and that's yet another way of using mindset over physical limitations. And so, you know, whether that fun was distracting or the way to do the one foot in front of the other, I don't know, but that is very interesting. But because then you have other people like Dave Goggins or, you know, other people that are just really almost seem to thrive on the grind. That you know, they have ways of pushing through the difficulties with that rather than, you know, flipping it on its head and making it fun. That's really, really interesting. So I mean, one thing to do a marathon, another one to do kind of back-to-back marathons for a while, but at what point did you realize there were longer distances than that?
So when I was in Germany, because I spent 7 years in Germany, so I did a lot of Volksmarches, and then just you started seeing other things because like it used to be in the Stars and Stripes. I don't even think they have the Stars and Stripes anymore. But anyway, they used to have a page, like a sports page in the back. They had a list of all of the Volksmarches that were going on that weekend throughout.
Oh, wow.
Not just in Germany, but it was in Italy and, you know, Spain, France, because I did, you know, Holland, Belgium, all those places I did events in pretty much. And then you start seeing the distances. You're like 42.195, and then you're like, oh, this says 100K. Well, okay, let's try that. And so, you know, you just started seeing longer and longer distances, and so I just started signing up for, like, one of my favorite events was the Dotentak, which is they call it the Belgian Death March. It's 100K, but like, you know, you do races in the United States, right? That race has 10,000 people doing 100K.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it stopped. The other thing is it stops at 2 breweries too. So
but maybe that's why there's so many people doing it.
Yeah. It's a great event. It really is. And then, so did the Doten Talk. There was one in Holland, my friend Mark and I did, called Zeewald to Zeewald. And that's a town. It's just kind of a loop course, I guess. And I think that was 110K. And we did that twice. But it's in the winter too. So it's like cold and wet and rainy. And those are also, when you start throwing in wet and cold, that's a whole nother, that really is hard for me. I really have to like push myself to go, okay, you just keep going. You got to keep going, keep going, keep going.
So you don't like cold? You prefer heat?
Oh yeah. So like during Vol State, for instance, most people do Vol State at night. I did all mine during pretty much all of mine early morning and throughout the day, because I don't mind the heat. So
how recently was that race?
Just whenever it was, just like a month and a half ago, 2 months ago.
Okay. All right. So it's still hot in the Southeast at that point.
Yeah. So you go Missouri, you take a ferry over across the Missouri, come back across, go through a little bit of Kentucky, Tennessee, and then you finish in Castle Rock, Georgia. And so I was wet for 10 days. I mean, I was just from the humidity, not, it was just wet. My shirt, my shorts, everything was just wet.
How do you do that? I mean, do you have a lot of change of clothes, or you just stay wet, or
just stay wet? As a matter of fact, I didn't bring any changes of clothes. The only thing I did was I make a thing called a badass bandana. So I make these bandanas, and I actually just made one for the hat like 2 days before I left. And so I never really even had a chance to test it out, but you can put ice in it. You can put water in it. You can keep it wet, and through evaporative cooling, you can keep yourself cold. For instance, I've never, like, I wet my sock. I take a sock and put it in my water bottle. I've never drank hot water. Now, it hasn't been ice cold, but it's been colder than my core temperature, which is what you got to do, because you don't want to be drinking 90, 100 degree water when your core temperature is already hot.
I see.
So if I can get it down to like 80 degrees or something like that, then it's good. You can drink it without any problem.
You just put a sock over your water bottle?
Yep. Just put a sock over the water bottle. It's better if it's a cotton sock, but I'm going to start making them actually with a bottle that fits in it perfectly, because I'm not the smartest man in the world, because when I just did Grand to Grand, I had a water bottle, but I left it at home, and I had my water bottles ready and I left them at home. So when I got to the race, I didn't have any water bottles, and I was I was looking at the stores. I'm like, so I ended up using was it Sweetwater or something water that comes in it's got a little tap or valve.
Yeah, the smart water.
Yeah, smart water bottle. And I ended up using that, but I went to the dollar store and I got some cotton socks and put it on there, taped them on there, and it worked good. The only problem was the smart water bottle isn't very thick, and so it was like it kept, like, by the time I was done, it was all just folded up on itself. It was I don't even 700 milliliters of water or something like that. I could barely fill the whole thing because it was all crushed and stuff. But it worked good. I mean, and I don't drink much water anyway. I mean, I try and drink what I can, but I'm not a big water drinker. But as long as I could keep that cool and keep my, if your core temperature is low, your heart rate isn't going to be as high. So your body doesn't need it's not demanding as much food or, water or anything like that, because you're already maintaining that. And so those bandanas, I used them both for Vol State and for Grand to Grand. And during Grand to Grand, there was no ice. So all I could do was pretty much wet it and but even with just that evaporative cooling, I was able to keep my chest, my carotids, and my subclavians cool enough to help keep the rest of my body cool. So that really helped. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So but as far as the rest of your clothes, if you're soaking wet and moving, how do you not, whether it's chafing or like just wide open wounds from wearing over and over again, how do you avoid that?
Well, so I make a foot and body cream called Trail Toes. And actually during both Vol State and Grand to Grand, I use a new cream I make, and it's a 30% zinc cream. It's named after Holly Lindroth because she's the one that asked me to make it for her. And when people ask me to do stuff, I try and give them credit. I don't get any money for it, but they get credit for
Yeah.
in involving themselves in the process. And so that one I used, and it's going to be released. I keep telling Holly it's going to be released, and she's like, when? Like, things have come up. And so anyway, I run my business by myself, and I make the creams, but I also make the bandanas, and I make a bunch of other things as well. But I make it all, so it's just me running the business.
Oh,
But so sometimes it takes me a little while to get things done because of that. So anyway,
but your main product is just a cream that you would not just on your toes, but you would put it in other places that would, rub and get raw.
Yeah. So I started the company when I was in Afghanistan in 2013. I was doing medevac missions on 7,000 feet on a mountaintop in Afghanistan. And so I got a hold of a manufacturer. I sent them a formula, and I got back in September. And so I actually used the cream for the first time during Grand to Grand, which is where I tested it out. And I've been a sponsor for their race ever since. And it's funny because I just used it again for my new product, the Grand to Grand. So, but that's how I do it. So I use cream, and then just like, I'm a big fan. Like, again, I'm not winning the race. My goal is to finish the race. I'm not winning the race. So I'm a big fan of, if I feel something or whatever, I stop. I take my shoes and my socks off. I let those socks dry out. I let my feet dry out. I put a little bit more cream on there, and then I put my shoes and socks back on. And then every time, like if I have to go to the bathroom or something like that, I always reapply the cream. And the zinc cream worked excellent because I always have problems with chafing in my butt, and I had no problems whatsoever during this event. And I only brought a little bit with me, and I let other people try it, and they loved it. And I gave it to a bunch of people during Vol State, and they really loved it as well. So, yeah. But I think it's cool. It's self-care, whether it's keeping yourself cool, keeping your water cool, keeping your body intact by, again, Grand, you don't change your clothes either. Vol State, I didn't change my clothes the whole time. The only thing I changed during Grand is my underwear every other day and my socks every other day. And I just throw the old socks away. During Vol State, I think I probably changed my underwear twice in the 10 days, and my socks maybe 4 times in the 10 days. So,
wow.
Because you're carrying everything. Like, there wasn't like, there's really no, during Vol State, they have angel stations, but there's no drop bags or anything like that. So you either carry it or you don't have it, or you buy it at a Dollar General.
Yeah. So I read online that there's 2 types of racers for that race. They're either crude or screwed.
No, he's not doing the crude anymore. It's just,
so nobody is crude.
No, nobody's crude.
Wow.
No.
Okay.
So in the past, I think, because like the Keys 100 was the same way. Keys used to have a kind of a crude and a screwed too. Or no, they used to have aid stations for people that were just running, but they don't have that anymore. So now when you do the Keys 100, you have to have a crew. So
for Vol State, then that means you're, as you said, you're carrying everything that is going to keep you alive, or you're getting to the Dollar General, and
yeah, you're just pretty much you're not carrying much because you're sleeping like they have some angel stations where you can kind of sleep. And some of them are really nice and very comfortable, like cots and things like that. But for the most part, like one night I slept in front of the hotel because there were no hotel rooms open. So I stayed like literally in front of under the atrium of the hotel, waiting for a room to open up so I could go, shower and clean up a little bit. I think I stayed in 2 hotels during that race. I think it was just 2, maybe 3. But anyway, but that's how you do it when you're there. You just kind of,
gotcha.
You just kind of whatever you sleep wherever you can. I never ate so many cold cans of soup, like, because you had to eat. And so I ate, like, I don't really eat gas station food much, but like I ate like chicken fingers and hamburgers and cold soup. SpaghettiOs out of the can.
Yeah, I guess over 300 plus miles, it's not really a a course that's going to be roped off. So are you walking and running on just a main road?
Yeah, it was horrible. I kept worrying about, I sometimes you just get worrying about weird things. That's why I don't like to run at night, because I worry about people on their phone at night, because you're running on the shoulder, and some shoulders are wide, but most shoulders, in some places there were no shoulders whatsoever. You were literally walking on a white line, like at Badwater or something, where there's not much space. And I always just had this image that this guy was going to be coming by with like a ratchet strap swinging out the back of his truck, and it was just going to like take my leg out or something.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why I had that thought in my head, but for some reason that was my biggest fear throughout that whole event, was I was going to get hit by a ratchet strap.
Well, I mean, I guess when you have like such a small margin for, something like that to happen with the space on the side of the road, your brain's going to a lot of different kind of places. So,
you can get dark. You can definitely get dark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that typically happen on these longer distances for you? You said earlier you get to a point of, well, one foot in front of the other. I got to, brain's telling me to stop. But as we pointed out with Lisa, and having hallucinations at times, or I've talked to a lot of other people that describe those really, really dark conversations or thoughts in a race. But is that normal for you? Like, are you expecting that when you go these distances?
No, the only thing, I got back from my second deployment, and I think I did, maybe it was my first deployment, and I was in China doing the Gobi March in China, and I remember it was night, and a lot of the areas that we were at were a lot like this terrain that were in Iraq. And I remember I don't know how I ended up it, but I had a Pelican light, way too heavy for that kind of event, but I didn't, it was my first time ever doing a stage race, and, and I was a lot younger too. So, but I remember it was late at night. It was like 2:00 in the morning. I think it was the long stage, and I was leading. Somehow I ended up with like 3 or 4 people with me, and we were going through this village, and I had my bright ass Pelican light, and I was shining it through the village. But when I was shining it, I was like going back and forth around buildings, and I was trying to see around buildings. And one of the guys is like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I'm like, and I literally came out of a trance, because I was back in Iraq.
Oh, geez.
And because I have PTSD from some of that, So, but anyway, but he literally got me out of a trance, and I'm like, oh, I'm just looking. But we finished the event. But that was like, that's happened a couple times, which is another reason why I don't like to go out at night. I don't like to run at night, because of like sounds and bushes and things like that. Yeah, okay, it's maybe nothing, but when you have that heightened sense of awareness based on your past and some of the conditions, it changes that level of heightness a little bit. So
that makes sense. No reason to put yourself in a hypervigilant state if you don't have to.
Right. And, that's just adds a level of anxiety, and you're already tired. And, so I try and that I deal with, that is something I have to deal with, especially like on long events, figure out how to like deal with that level of potential anxiety, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So Vol State, I had not heard a whole lot about it until you mentioned it in some of our early conversations. And then to find out that Lazarus Lake, came up with this, the same guy that's a lot of people know through the Barkley Marathon.
Right.
I mean, this guy just comes up with some of the craziest, most difficult things to do. Have you had any interaction with him?
Very, very little. I mean, I know a lot of race directors, just because I support a lot of runs throughout the United States and actually through the world. And we didn't have very much of an interaction. At the end of the race, we talked maybe for 20 minutes, and, just him, talking about his events and things like that. He does have 2 other races that are a lot like Vol State, and that's Latch, and I don't know what they stand for, and the other one is HOTS. But apparently there's like a special trio that you can do. And so I don't really like that kind of event, but I like the challenge of that event. And so And because it's a trilogy, I may end up doing all three of those events just so I could, I don't know, just
Vol State and then these other two are the trilogy?
Lats and Hots. Yeah. I
How do you
think
spell Hotch?
Hots, Hots.
Hots. I
Something
see.
about the South. It has something to do hotter than other than, I don't know, something about the South.
Okay.
I don't know what they stand for. I barely I I didn't even, because I heard labs for a long time, but I never really connected it's the last annual Vol State. I just, but that's what they call it, labs. But most people just call it Vol State. But yeah,
Yeah. Since the very first one, it's always been the last annual Vol State.
yeah. It's always been the last annual. He's a
Yeah.
quirky guy. He's a really interesting guy, and to sit and talk with him, you do gain some insight. But he is an interesting guy, a little quirky. Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit about your Trail Toes product. I mean, you mentioned earlier how you got into it, created it,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems now that you're doing a lot of even education around not just foot care, but body care and ways to take self-care through these races as really a competitive advantage, a way to, whether it's compete or to complete. So tell me a little bit about what that journey has been like through this product.
So it helps that I have a doctorate in orthopedics. So I have I've reached my pinnacle of education. I'm not doing it anymore. And my military experience, so as a medical service corps officer, well, as an infantryman, you learn about self-care as an infantryman because, I was a light infantryman. So everything that we did was on our feet, so I learned as a young man that if you didn't take care of your feet, you didn't get to finish. And even back then we had a competitive ruck marching team when I was a young man, and we would compete against the other companies in our battalion and brigade. And I was always in the top three of those guys doing those events. But I really was like a total separate thing, because I didn't really pursue running after the military. It wasn't until 2001 when I met up with those guys. But and then in my medical service corps years, it was all about organization, prepping for missions and things like that, preparing the medics so they could do their job. I didn't do medical at that point. It was just all medical planning. And then being a PA, so I had that early on experience. Then I had the operational side of it, and then I had the medical side of it. So I have a pretty good understanding of, how to prep and prepare, and then also care for issues. But so Trail Toes is really just, there's a bunch of different creams out there, many different ones, and Trail Toes works for a lot of people, and I'm really proud of it. What I'm also proud of is that, like, we don't just have one product. I don't just have one product. I have 4 different products, but all different formulas. And so what doesn't work for one person may work for another one. And, so, because a lot of times it's your body oils, it's your body salts, it's how much you sweat, how you don't sweat enough, or whatever, that will affect how whatever cream you put on will work and how long it will last and things like that. I make an organic cream that's 100% organic, but I always tell people, when you use that, you have to reapply it more often because of the fact that it's organic. So it's going to break down quicker. And so you got to reapply it more often and things like that. So knowing how to use it is important. And then, I have used everything that I sell. I have used and tried. So it's not like I'm just buying a product off the shelf and then saying, here, use this, it's great. I've used it and I know it works. But anyway, so I think that I love, I go up to Trailhead Running Supply Company up in Flower Mound usually at least once a year. I've been doing it once a year, and I give a big class up there. And I love teaching. I was a professor. I taught at the Army's, the military PA program for 3.5 years. I taught tactical medicine for 3.5 years. I taught at the University of Texas, University of Memphis, and the University of North Texas in their PA programs. And so I love teaching. And I think that, and it's always been like kind of the mindset of the PA profession, that your job, especially in the military, your job is to train your medics to be able to do what you do because they're forward, like they're with a unit. And so they're there to provide care. And if you don't train your medics, they're not going to be able to do their job. And so I love teaching, and I love standing in front of a crowd and, laughing with them and, cracking jokes and things like that. So I have a pretty comprehensive one. I do that, and I go help Lisa Howard, who is an amazing woman. She puts on this event called Band of Runners, and it's a free program for vets, for firefighters, medical personnel, and things like that. And it's a running clinic, but it's not just a running clinic. It's also like a wellness clinic, a mental health clinic as well, where you go and you're there. I think for 3 or 4 days you're there, and they have more volunteers for the runners than there are runners. And everybody brings their certain level of expertise. Like they'll have running clinics in the afternoon, during the day, and they'll have fast, medium, and slow groups. I go and help Eliza put on a blister care class, and I love that. I mean, I love working with the veterans and stuff like that. During the Grand to Grand, for instance, at the very beginning of the event, somebody said, hey, the race director, Colin Geddes, came to me and said, hey, there was a guy here last year who had really bad problems with his feet. I would like for you to sit down with him and talk him through how to best take care of him. So, I got to thinking, so I'm like, I just stood in the middle of the camp, because there's a camp with all these tents. And I said, hey, look, I'm getting ready to put on a foot care clinic right now. Anybody who wants to join, please come and join me. One of the guys went to the medical tent, got some tape for me, so I didn't have to use my own. And I put on this little like 45-minute clinic for everybody that wanted to come.
Just off the cuff.
Just off the cuff. Yeah. Because I think it's important, because people, they buy stuff, but and you can watch something, but it's not the same as actually sitting down and doing it. Like I always tell people, like if you're going to crew somebody, like if you're a runner and you're going to have runners crew for you, you need to teach them how to take care of your feet, because at 4:00 in the morning, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to bend forward to waist. Your fingers are going to be swollen. Your mind is not going to be there. So you need to sit down with your crew the night before the race or whatever and say, okay, this is how I want you to tape my feet. This is how I want you to tape my ankle. This is how I want you to whatever, tape my back or whatever, because of the fact that they're simply not going to be able to do it. They're not going to have the mental capacity for it to 4:00 in the morning, especially if it's cold and wet. So
So as you've trained people on self-care, foot care, whatever it is, what have these problems taught you about people themselves? So whether it's crew dynamics or how people make as you were just pointing out, decision making under stress and suffering, or even like, I think any athlete has the ability to deceive themselves at some point. So as you've taught people these ways of taking care of themselves, what have you learned about people in general?
So one of my good friends, I'm going to mention his name, Rick Burrow. We've done Grand a couple times, and this year he came and he was part of a team. And one of the problems with team dynamics is that if you don't train together as a team, you're not going to be able to finish together as a team. And I don't think him and Jim had trained enough together, and so they didn't have the same pace. And the problem is one guy was really fast, and one guy, and Rick, wasn't at that level, and so he was trying to keep up. And by the time he got to the third aid station on the first day, he was done, because he couldn't separate himself. He could have said, hey, look, Jim, I can't go on. I just need to stop and get my own pace so I can finish the event. We won't finish as a team, but you get in that dynamic, and there's a lot of races out there that are team events, and those are harder because you all have to be on the same sheet of music, because one guy is always, or girl's always, going to push the others. And if you're not willing to say, hey, look, I need to slow down, or if you wait past the point of no return, you're not going to be able to finish. And so, and I think that just goes a long way with everything. I have another friend who was doing Western States, and I think she had 9 miles left or 12 miles left or something like that. Plenty of time, way under the 24-hour mark. And because I thought she was going to finish under 24 hours. But apparently she was having really bad stomach problems, bad stomach issues. And I told you, what are the 3 things to take you out? balls and bottoms of your feet, belly, and your brain. And
Mm-hmm.
so she stopped, but she didn't give herself enough time. And I have another story to tell too. But so she stopped, but her crew had kind of convinced her to quit, even though she had plenty of time to rest. She could have rested literally for 2 hours and still been able to finish. But her crew, and I don't know the whole dynamics. I wasn't there. There could have been other things going on. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
that I don't know about. But anyway, collectively, whether it was her and her crew and whatever, doesn't really matter. But collectively, they decided to quit, even though she had plenty of time. She could have slept for 2 solid hours and she could have finished that event. But so the team has to be part of that thought process, and your team has to be that you're not going to quit. And I was the long stage of Grand to Grand. I got to this one point, and it was the fifth aid station, and there was a young kid came in, mid-20s or something like that, healthy looking, but again, his brain was getting to him. You could see it.
Mm-hmm.
That he sat down. He's like, he went, did the cut underneath his throat that I'm done. And
Mm-hmm.
I looked at him and I angrily said to him. I said, no, you're not. You're not quitting. You're going to eat something. You're going to go sleep for 2 hours, and then you're going to wake up and you're going to hit those sand dunes. And he looked at me like I was his father yelling at him or something, which in reality I kind of was. And I was like, no, you're not quitting. You're not. You're going to go. You're going to eat. You're going to sleep. And guess what? He went and he ate and he slept. And the last day of the event, he ran past me with no issues whatsoever. He finished.
Wow.
And there was another guy.
Lisa talks about the, and let me interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
She mentioned this even recently, crewing for Bob Becker at Badwater, where as the person on the crew that is there to take care of the athlete, she said many times it's about tough love. It's about saying the hard thing that the person can't think for themselves in that moment. And obviously to a point of, making sure that physically they're okay. But setting that to the side, then it's about saying, no, you're not done. We'll worry about something else later on, but you need to keep pushing, keep going. And so I'm curious, with when you put together crews, or if you've ever had a crew for any of your races, do you look for people that are willing to say those tough things to you? Are you looking for a certain kind of person or personality?
So I, to be honest with you, I've never had a crew. And
Never in all these long races.
No, I had a guy came and he was with me for, like, I was doing Cactus Rose. It was my second attempt at Cactus Rose. Is also, I've DNF'd Cactus Rose twice. And I asked one guy one year to come out and crew with me, and he showed up 2 hours late, and I was waiting for him. And then he left me before we got to the end. And I have a thing about crew. I think it's okay to have a crew, but I would never have a pacer. But I disagree with pacing. That's just me. Although we did crew Aaron Hale, and he's blind and deaf, and so he kind of needs a pacer. And I really enjoyed crewing him for Badwater. And we were actually supposed to crew him for Route 66, but he had other issues, so he couldn't make that run. But that's where I would have been in November doing that with him. But but yeah, I don't ever. I think that I've most of the events I've always done, especially in Europe, there's always enough places where you get food. Vol State, there's enough places to get food. Grand to Grand, you're carrying your own food. I have a really good system that I've developed over the years for setting up my own drop boxes. And so I think that if you're going to do an event, you should just do it. And because you're there to test yourself. And the problem with having a crew is, and I say this because I did this. So I had that one guy come out and run with me, and I didn't finish. I think I stopped at 75 miles. So I had one more loop to do. And I still blame him for that. And I shouldn't, because, there was one point where I laid down in the middle of the trail because I was just too tired, and it was cold. And but I can still look back and blame him for that. and
Gotcha.
but I know I can't. And so I always think that if I'm going to do this, I should just do it and figured it out, which is really why I like stage races, because a stage race, you don't have anybody, you don't have a crew, you're carrying it all. I measure out all my food, everything else, and it's all pre-planned. Everything is like, the only thing you have to do is just finish the day, and eat as much as you can. So
And Grand to Grand is a stage race?
stage race, yeah.
How many stages?
It's 6 stages, 7 days. Yeah. And the first day always kills people because it's like 32 miles long and it's out in the open. So it's flat, but out in the open. And so people think they can just run it. Well, you can, but you got to remember that you got 5 more stages and 6 more days. So
man.
a lot of people end up leaving the first day. Not a lot, but and I think this year they had the lowest dropout rate of any. Even though I think they had less people, they just had a less dropout rate too. So it was a milder year too.
Has your military background and military mindset helped you with doing these kind of things, or have you found any times where it's really been a hindrance?
No, I think it's done nothing but help me because
really?
I'm used to wearing a rucksack. I'm used to packing. Like, as a young infantry, I used to go back to my young infantryman days. Like I could tell you where, my compass was in my rucksack. I could tell you where my socks were in my rucksack. And even now I can tell you where I put my socks, where I put my food, how I could tell you where all that stuff is, because again, it's
Preparation.
It's all about pre-planning. The better you pre-plan, even though I'm not always the best at it. I was buying stuff at REI as I was going through Alamogordo, New Mexico. I stopped at the REI there because I forgot this or that. And so, but I had to get out of the house. Otherwise I was never going to leave because the work here is never done. I'm always, there's always something I'm behind on. So, yeah.
Well, let me kind of bring some concluding questions to this, but you've done, do you have any idea how many of these ultra marathons that you've done since the beginning?
Well, I think I've done 12 or 13 stage races. I've done, a handful of 100-milers. Like I always do snowdrop. I support the run, which and it's kind of a cultish thing. A lot of people go do snowdrop every year. And
where is that?
That's I think it's Missouri City in Texas, just south of Houston. But it's a great event. They raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for children cancer. But people go set up for 3 days. It's a 55-hour event, and people set up for 3 days. And it's a lot of the same people go out there. And so, you talk about the running community. Like, you do a 5K, you're done with it. You do a half marathon, you're done with it. You go home, do a marathon. There's not a lot of the camaraderie that there is, but you do an ultra event, you're out there for a lot longer, especially if it's a loop course, you're seeing the crews as you go through and things like that. And a lot of people know each other because they do the same kind of events in the same areas. Like Florida ultra runners all know each other. A lot of us in Texas know each other because we do a lot of the same events. And so it's kind of nice to go out and see people that you don't see all the time. For instance, I talked about Lisa Decker she's out of Houston area, but, doing Vol State with her, is kind of cool. And not really with her, but, seeing her out on the course and stuff. Because she did it at night and I did during the day. So we kind of cross paths every once in a while.
Every once in a while. What do you find within this community that makes it as special as it is?
I think it's because we're all willing to challenge each other, but we're also friendly enough that you can kind of pick on each other a little bit without ramifications, I'm going to beat you or whatever. And I'm like, everybody's always going to beat me. So it's not, really too much, but just seeing each other and being able to tell stories and things like that, watch growth and then, having a familiarity with somebody and saying, hey, look, you can't quit. I know who you are. I know how strong you are. And I know you're better than this. So let's get up and keep going, things like that.
Yeah, that's pretty special. I mean, accepting is one thing. It seems to me, the community around many of these races is very accepting to anybody that wants to be out there.
Yeah.
Very welcoming, and I can't think of what the term is, but what you just described. Yes, we're competing, but I want you to finish just like I want me to finish, and so trying to help each other out to get across the finish line. That's pretty cool too.
So during Grand, I keep talking about this because I've just done it, so it's fresh in my mind.
Yeah.
But one of the things where there are two other people like Gary Jackets and Leanne Richardson. She's from Canada and he's from England, and they both have 5 finishes, or now they have 5 finishes, but before they had 4. And so there was always that like chiding with each other, chiding, whatever. Gary kept saying the whole event, he's like, I'm going to fill your rucksack up with sand, because I just want to weigh you down so you can't finish, because then we'll all have 5. And I kept thinking, well, if I don't finish and Gary does, that'll be bad, because, that means there's 2 guys with 5 finishes. And somehow, and I don't know if this is fair or not, but I could rationalize Leanne doing it, because then she'd be the first female with 5 and I'd be the first male with 5. But it shouldn't be that way. It should just be, I should still have 1 more than her. And so like during the whole event, I would go, because they were in the same tent together and I was in a different tent, but I would go into their tent every day, not every day, but about every other day. And I'd be like, so is he ready to quit yet? Leanne, you ready to quit yet? Because then at the very end, I made these shirts, and talk about like the camaraderie of this. I made these shirts because I make a bunch of stuff. And so I have a sublimation machine. So I made these shirts with the 5 finisher patches for Grand on the shirt. And I only wore 1 during the race. And at the very end, but I made a couple of them. And so at the very end, when we had the awards banquet, I gave Leanne one of the shirts, because now she had 5 finishes. And so she had a shirt with, a Trail Toes Ambassador thing on it. And she also had the 5 finisher patches. But I gave Harry my dirty one with my name, the one I wore for every day, and with my bib number on it. And I have my name was War Paint, because when I did Vol State, there was a picture of me with my zinc cream underneath my eyes, and somebody said my new trail name was War Paint.
War Paint.
War Paint. And so when I did Grand, instead of having my name, I had my trail name on there, War Paint.
That's cool. Well, let me ask you this one last question to wrap us up here. If you could boil it down to 1 or 2 things, what is it that keeps you going back? So, what I realize with a lot of these adventures is they're hard. People suffer and struggle, and many times it's very, very painful to get through. And yet for you, I'm sure there's a lot of that similarity in any of these feats that you've gone through, but what is it that keeps drawing you back? Why do you keep putting yourself through these things over and over again? What are you gaining from doing this?
So when I was in the Army, when I was deployed, I think I'm probably an anomaly. I loved being deployed and I loved going out on missions. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about the adrenaline of it or whatever. But I think it's that same feeling every time I go to the starting line. Am I going to come back in through the wire that night? Am I going to be able to cross the finish line? I like the internal challenge of it. I like the fact that very first run that I did in Germany in 2001 set a stage for always trying to challenge myself to go further. Like, I didn't know I could do Vol State, because I'll be honest with you, I don't train. I don't really, I have time, but my business keeps me really busy, and I can procrastinate with the best of them. And so when I did Vol State, I think I carried my rucksack maybe twice around the neighborhood before that 314-mile run.
Oh my gosh.
And when I did Grand to Grand, and this is, I'm not lying, I literally had just filled my rucksack up in the room, the motel room that day that I was going to check in. I was still attaching my water bottle holders, because I don't like bladders. I have to have water bottle holders. So I have an old set that I tore out. And again, because I'm able to make stuff, I was able to fiddle with this and put my water bottle holders on the rucksack the day before we left to go out to the camp.
Oh,
And
wow.
but to me, that's a challenge that I'm willing to accept. I'm like, okay, so I just did Grant, I just did Vol State, so I should have enough residual training in me from that event to get me through Grand. And in Vol State, my mantra for Vol State, you talk about that, is that I had to get through the first 3 days. If I could get through the 3 days, I knew I could finish the event. But in my head, I just had to keep saying 3 days, 3 days, 3 days, get through these 3 days, get through these next two, this next one. Okay, I'm through those. Now you just 1 foot in front of the other until you're done. And it's kind of the same thing with Grand. I just have to make it through the first day or two, and I knew I could finish because I know the course so well that I know where the challenges are. That did change a lot of the route. So, but I think it's just an internal challenge. I'm not competitive although I will say this, Gary and I on the first day, that son of a gun, he's a lot faster than me. He's like 10 years younger than me, but he's a lot faster. He has a really good stride. But for some reason, I got ahead of him. And as we were coming to cross the finish line, he snuck up behind me. And somebody said, look behind you. And I look behind him, I see him, and he's like 10 steps behind me. And so I start running, and I don't run during these events generally. But I'm like hauling. And later on, I saw a video of it, and I thought I was running like really fast, but I looked like I'm running in slow motion. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like,
yeah.
I'm doing 100-yard dash and I'm winning. But anyway, but I'm not usually competitive. But for him, I had to be ahead of him for that first day. And but I think it's just that internal struggle to achieve hard things. And I think that there is some gratification in finishing. In Volksmarching, they always say no stamp, no step, because as you go through the event, you go to these little, I'm just going to call it aid station for lack of a better word, but they give you a little stamp in your book, because you get a little book and you got to get these stamps in order to get your certificate at the end and your patch. And so, it's no stamp, no step. And so it's kind of the same thing. The T-shirt and the buckle are good, but to me, it's that the little tear that you get in the corner of your eye when you cross the finish line that you hope nobody sees, because you have that self-gratification that you were able to do something really hard. And these events are really hard.
Yeah.
Like a marathon's hard, but you start getting beyond a marathon.
Yeah.
That's a completely different animal.
Well, it sounds like what you're describing, though, is seeing where you measure up as a person, as a human being. And I don't think there are many places to get a true sense of that where you haven't put yourself in a precarious situation, right? It's kind of the idea that you don't get true joy without being willing to feel the pain. And so to really see where you measure up, you got to do something like the things that you're doing.
Right. But I think it's an internal measurement. It's not like I'm measuring against you if you're out on the course with me. It's I'm maybe there is some of that, but it's low key from my perspective, because I'm not winning. As a matter of fact, I was dead last at when I did the Keys 100. I was dead last.
Yeah, but you finished.
I finished, and at Grand, I was dead last too. But again, the goal is to finish, but there is some gratification in that, in knowing that I am capable of doing something really hard when I see other people who are stronger than me dropping out or quitting or whatever, for whatever reason. And again, those reasons are most of the time when people quit, they shouldn't have. Like when I can tell you right now, when I quit Tahoe, the Tahoe 100, I was at mile 65. I wasn't sick. I wasn't hurt. I wasn't in pain. It was all just mental. I sat down and said, I'm done. I'm not going to go any further, So, that's, you have those regrets, and the whole idea is just to stay ahead of yourself so you don't have those regrets in the future. So
that's really good. And I think a great way to wrap up our conversation. Appreciate you spending an hour with me going through all of your feats, but really the lessons that you've learned along the way too. I think the feedback I get from our listeners is that is as valuable as hearing the things that people are doing. So this has been great. I will, in the show notes, I'll make sure people have a way to find Trail Toes if they want to find out more about your products. Are you on social media? Can people find you online as well?
Yeah, I'm online, and I always tell people, like, if you have questions, just call or just write me, because I like the conversation. People text me all the time. Can you tell me how to do this or that? And I'm like, just call me. There's way too many steps involved, and it's just easier for me to talk you through the process than me trying to text, because I'm 65 years old, and I'm not very good at the social media stuff. But yeah, I have a Trail Toes page, and but I have a contact page on my website for Trail Toes. So
great. I'll link to all that, and anybody wants to get in touch with you, they'll be able to find you. So, Vincent, thanks for your time, man. I really appreciate it. It's been great, and best of luck on your next one, whatever that might be.
Snowdrop, yeah. Thanks. I appreciate you having me on. It was really a joy. And again, if people want to learn more, or they have questions about care, really, I'm being very earnest when I say I'll take your calls or your whatever, and I'll help you out in any way I can.
That's awesome.
So yeah,
very generous. All right, man. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Take care, man. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks for listening to another episode of the On Adventure podcast. Be on the lookout for another episode dropping in a couple weeks. And be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe and follow us there, as well as on all the socials from Facebook to Instagram and LinkedIn. Until our next episode, I hope you stay safe and stay on adventure.